going on, everybody? How you doing? What's good with you? It's Dan. This is Moonshine talking. Well, it's hot as blazes down here right now. We're under a heat advisory, so it's been a very hot, hazy, and steamy day for at least the past couple of days. I think it's supposed to be that way for the next week, so yay! So staying hydrated and drinking plenty of water and Gatorade and whatnot. And even though I'm still going to the gym and sweating my ass off, I'm making sure to replenish all those vital vitamins and minerals and whatnot, so my body doesn't fall apart and things don't start failing and whatnot. But anyway, how you doing? But speaking of heat, I figured I will discuss, since everybody else is, as the title would suggest, this whole AJ Styles and his son controversy, debacle, debate, maybe non-tent, nothing burger sort of situation. This is more of a wrestling thing, again, so if you're not really into the wrestling thing, hopefully you find one of my videos after this entertaining. But if you stick around and you're not really a wrestling person, hopefully I can kind of give you like a little bit of a education on the wrestling business, and you kind of get a feel for why this is such a thing. I mean, generally speaking, I think it's a thing because all sorts of various wrestling personalities and commentators and whatnot, it's just a story that can get, it's kind of a trendy topic right now, so everybody doing clicks and views and all that sort of thing off of it. But I did think it was interesting. I've watched a couple of people's takes on it, and I figured I'd throw mine in. For the most part, the ones who I've watched, they really haven't dissuaded or persuaded me from my opinions. I find them pretty interesting. Some I kind of felt like, yeah, I could kind of see that one coming a mile away, as far as some of the commentary that was added. Sorry, I'm going to be sidetracked just momentarily because I do want to silence my phone so it doesn't go off while I'm doing this. First up, I mean, as far as somebody who's got some interesting opinions, worth listening to, worth mentioning, is Perry Saturn. If you don't know who Perry Saturn is, I've talked about him in my most recent video about the Raven documentary. But Perry he's a wrestler from the 90s and 2000s. He wrestled all over the country. Most notably, he was one half of the Eliminators in Extreme Championship Wrestling, ECW. He then went on WCW, and he wrestled under his moniker Perry Saturn. Eventually, my trainer, Dean Malenko, Eddie Guerrero, and Chris Benoit, they all jumped ship from WCW to WWF, and they formed a team that they called the Radicals. That was the faction. Eventually, they were slowly but surely splintered off because Benoit had that it factor that they were looking for, and so did Eddie. Eddie was such a charismatic personality and such a good worker that he just, he couldn't be denied. So they kind of went off and did their thing, but Dean and Perry, they worked together as a tag team quite a bit in WCW. They continued that in WWF. And then eventually they splintered off, and Dean did one thing, and then he kind of slowly phased out and started working as an agent, backstage guy with WWF. And Perry was doing all sorts of various gimmicks, one of which was moppy, where he carried a mop around. And I think the idea was that there's an old adage in wrestling that the best workers could work a broomstick. And he had gotten into some trouble with the office because he was working with a guy, Mike Bell, and famously Mike Bell dropped him on his head because their timing was off, and Saturn kicked the crap out of him, threw him out of the ring. You can find all this on YouTube. And the guy landed on his head. He could have killed him, he could have paralyzed him, but fortunately none of that happened. But he just beat the crap out of him, and he got in a lot of trouble for it. And then they ended up sticking him with the mop. and he was also with Terry Runnels, which was Goldust's ex-wife. And it was supposed to be a punishment, but Perry has this kind of like bizarre charisma and charm to him that he got the gimmick over. And then eventually they did, I think they did something where they threw the mop into a, I forget how they got rid of the mop, but eventually they got rid of it. But he's been around forever, and then he got released by WWF. I can't remember exactly what he did, but then he's had some personal issues and some bunch of stuff related to drug use and abuse. But he's doing well now. He seems to have kind of gotten he's gotten the plane back up. He's kind of landed the plane, for lack of a better way of describing it. And he's got a YouTube channel that he just started a month ago, and it's great. I love hearing his stories. He's got a great opinion. So go check out Perry Saturn's channel, is the point of that. So anyhow, he talked about it. A couple other people talked about it. Pretty much all the big podcasters in the wrestling sphere have talked about it. So I figured, why not one of us in the smaller sphere? Let's get one of us nobodies to talk about it. I will offer my 1 cent. Normally this would be 2 cents, but with inflation it'd probably be 5 cents. But with me not really being a name or having some like renowned recognition within the business, we'll stick at 1 cent. So anyhow, the controversy. AJ Styles, a recently retired pro wrestler, been around forever. AJ is one of these guys who, when I was breaking into the business, he was probably like a year or two behind me, but obviously far surpassed anything that I ever did. He was one of those guys who, during the time when I got into the business, I wrestled for a couple of years, and then I took a few years off. During that time, there was a bunch of guys who came up during that time that they went on to have very long and noteworthy careers. Most notably would be American Dragon Bryan Danielson, AJ, I would even say Roderick Strong. As far as guys on the indies, who a lot of us they would come and work shows down here in Florida. But these are some of the guys who they went on to have careers, and they would pop into Florida here every once in a while. And yeah, and he was just one of those guys who he went on to have a long career in the business. He worked for TNA, Impact Wrestling, forever, and then eventually he jumped to WWF, and I think he might have had like at least a solid 10-year run there. And then he retired. They stuck him in the Hall of Fame. He's out as a talent scout for the company now, and his son is getting into the business now. He's breaking in. His son's name is Avery. He's had probably like 8 or 9 matches or something like that. So he goes and he works for the company Game Changer Wrestling, which is run by, I want to say, Joey Janela and Brett Lauderdale are the 2 guys that are the 2 main guys behind it. And both have they're kind of like heat magnets and controversial and that sort of thing. Like, some people like them, some people think they're great, other people think that they're not so great. Some people don't really care for their promotion at all, because there's a mix of, on top of like there's lots of indie spot monkey stuff, there's a bunch of like hardcore garbage wrestling, and then just some of the people and some of the stuff that happens on Game Changer in GCW. Depending on your taste, it might not be for you. I know Jim Cornette razzes on them quite a bit. Other people do, without naming names. Some people in my social circle don't really care for GCW. But regardless, they go. AJ's son gets booked on the show. He works a match. And then after the match is over, Natty Neidhart, if anyone's familiar with Natty, with Natalia, Jim Neidhart's daughter, she's had a long career in WWF. She's been there. She's probably one of the more tenured people. I know when Florida Championship Wrestling came down here after they dissolved Deep South and Ohio Valley Wrestling, they came here to the I'm not trying to like name drop or anything, it's just the history and facts, but the school that I trained at was Steve Kern's wrestling school, and they took everything over, kicked all of us out, and we were all left to our own devices. But they took everything over. But one of the first nights that I was there, and I was training at the school while they were still kind of getting things together, Natty was there, and she was real cool. Mentioned something about my beard, and that was pretty much the extent of our interaction that we've had in the probably. Oh boy, I want to say that was like 2008, so probably in 18 years, that's the one interaction I've had with her. But regardless, she put over Avery and the guy he wrestled, this guy, Marcus Mathers, I guess his name is. He's an indie guy, but he's in the WWE ID program, which is basically, that's their way of saying that they're keeping their eye on you, and you're in the pipeline, and they're watching you, and just, for lack of a better way of describing it, they're kind of grooming you to get a contract, or you're on their radar, and they're keeping tabs on you and trying to help spur along the development of your career so that you eventually can get into the company. So and the match itself was good. Both guys are very athletic. Avery's very undersized. But he's also 19 years old, so he'll grow. The other guy, he was very smooth, athletic, a lot of potential. Some of his selling left a little bit to be desired. Same with Avery, but I want to try to give him a little bit of a grace period, because this is, again, like his 8th or 9th match that he just had. And you kind of have to figure he's still, he's super wet behind the ears. It doesn't matter who his dad is or how long he's been training in his family's backyard or whatever the case might be. He's being out in a crowd, in front of a crowd, and working matches with butterflies and nerves and all sort of thing. It's a totally different experience than doing it in a training center, wrestling school, dojo, whatever the case might be. But overall, it was a decent match, but you can definitely see where both guys are still learning. They're still learning the craft. They talked craft. They're still learning how to work. And I know the one guy, the Marcus Mathers guy, I guess he's a second generation guy too. I couldn't really find much information on that, so if somebody knows what the deal is there, let me know. But regardless, whatever his backstory is, both of them to me looked still very green. Like, there was moments where you could tell that the direction, production ratio was a little off as far as that went, but it was all right. I would say probably my main critique is that it was like a 19-minute match, and it took about 15 minutes to start telling any sort of story. Like, it probably, to me, it would have made a lot of sense if they would have done something like AJ's kid's being berated the entire time because he's AJ Styles' kid. I mean, that's kind of like, it seems like the no-brainer kind of storyline that you would tell. The psychology that you would use is you kind of bully this kid, you treat him like he's the, you bully him because he's the Nepo baby and he doesn't belong there and this sort of thing. And let's see what you got, kid. You're nothing like your old man, blah, 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 that sort of thing. And eventually he fights from underneath and kind of you do something based off of that. That would be kind of like the foundation that I would say would be the best way to build any sort of high drama off of what you could do with him at this point, at this juncture in his career. And then you just kind of go from there and build the match and construct it around that would be my generalized idea of how you would do a match that could get both of them over and something that would make some sort of sense and get people emotionally invested in it. But that's just my opinion. So anyhow, the big controversy is that when Natty put the tweet out on when she put posted her message on Twitter, a veteran indie wrestler by the name of Eric Cannon got on there and he started berating Avery for not setting up the ring and not helping out with chairs. And then AJ got onto Twitter and responded and said that he was there to wrestle. He wasn't there to set up the ring. He wasn't there to set up chairs or the arena. That wasn't what his job was. His job was to be there, work a match, and that was it. So this caused a whole big hubbub. Depending on who you ask, this is an important aspect of paying dues. Now, like with Saturn, Dutch Mantel, a bunch of other guys, and Saturn was trained the old school way. Of course, Dutch was trained the old school way. He is the old school way. But Saturn was trained by Killer Kowalski. And I saw a couple of podcasters mention something about Kowalski would make everybody set up chairs and do flyers and this, that, and the other thing. Saturn swears he never set a ring up in his life. And he didn't even know how to set up a wrestling ring, and he owned a wrestling school. He just paid somebody to do it. So there's a prevailing theory among some that in order to pay your dues in the business, you have to do things like set up the ring, set up the chairs, do concessions, go out and be part of the street team, all of that stuff. And then there's the other school of thought where, well, no, I'm the talent. You're paying me to wrestle. You're not paying me to... The way I'm selling tickets is by drawing people to the house. That's how I'm supposed to sell tickets. It's not me going out onto the street, handing out flyers and this, that, and the other thing, and doing all that stuff and showing up early to set up the ring and set up chairs and get everything set up. You should have people there to do all that. And there's a truth to that. There's certainly... I can see both sides of the argument where, yeah, I can totally get where, you're showing that you're part of the team and you're there not having an ego. You're there to show that you're willing to do whatever it takes to make this thing grow. And that, in a way, shows that you're serious about the business. You're serious about being a pro wrestler. You have respect for the business. And then there's other people that are there. They're of the mindset where, well, no, it's not my job. You paid me to wrestle, and you're paying me to wrestle. And if you can't afford to pay me to wrestle and also to have somebody there to set up the ring, somebody who is an actual knowledgeable ring guy with a ring crew, or you have people that are there to set up the chairs and set the building up and get everything set up. If you don't have enough money to do all that, then it's probably not a show worth being on, because all you're doing is, some are saying, exploiting people for free labor, which that's kind of the more cynical way of looking at it. But a lot of times what it is indie promotions, they typically don't have a lot of money nowadays. A lot of the promoters tend to work on the show. Half the time they own a ring, and they are part of the ring crew. And a lot of times nowadays with indie shows, a guy will get booked on the show because he has a ring. I've been on many shows over the years where that has been the case, where a guy who might... Some are good, some aren't, but sometimes somebody could be absolute dog shit in the ring, but they still get booked because they have a ring, and wrestling promoters need rings. And if they give them a good deal, they're like, "Hey, brother, I'll give you X, Y, and Z." And they're, "Oh, well, you can give me this and this, but if you book me, then I'll, book me and my friend, and we can work on it." There's that sort of kind of horse trading that goes on in the business, particularly on the indie level. So there's a lot of that. But I know personally, speaking for myself, when I would work with my home promotion, I would always help out whenever I could. I would, if they needed help setting up chairs, no problem. It's not a big deal to me. It's kind of one of those things. None of us are getting rich off of this, so let's all just work together and do this and get it done. I can tell you one time I didn't even work for the company. I went to a show. It was called the promotion's called Full Impact Pro, FIP, and they had their big event was the Cage of Pain, and a bunch of my buddies were in the main event. I think it was my buddies, the Heartbreak Express and the Market Crashers, and they were working with friggin' a guy named Kenny King, and Sal Renaro was another guy, and a couple other guys. I can't remember a couple of the names of the other guys that were in it. And the Cage of Pain was a cage match, and it was all weapons filled, and just all that sort of, just the violent hardcore weapons style of match. And I was just hanging out, and somebody came up to me and they're like, "Hey, Moonshine, can you help us with the cage? Moving that, getting it set up." "Yeah, no problem. I can do that. No worries." So I just got up and helped. I mean, I figured they let me into the building for free, so it was the least I could do. I'm one of the boys, so it doesn't really, it reflects badly on me if they ask. I'm like, "Yeah, screw you. I know you let me in here for free, but what do you expect me to do? You expect me to work for free?" Kind of that sort of thing. So there's a divided. There's a school of thought for each philosophy. And if you ask me, I would say, to me, it looks better for you as somebody breaking into the business, somebody that's new, that's green, that's trying to earn everybody's respect. It does make more sense, specifically if the promoter asks you, or somebody who is high up in the company asks you to help out, which is apparently what they did. But at the same time, I'm sure that AJ has told his kid that that's not what he's there for. Maybe he even, after the promoter, whoever asked him to set up chairs, he might have texted his dad and asked him what he should do, or should I do this? They're asking me to do this, and tell, hell no, you're not there to do all that. So, I mean, it's going to get him heat. It's certainly going to get him heat. I used the term Nepo baby earlier, and that's a term I heard somebody use, a podcaster. I just listened to their take on it, and they used the Nepo baby thing. And then they mentioned something about AJ Styles being a flat earther, which that was a thing that I had heard years ago. And I just because I know these people, and I've listened to them enough to kind of know like their worldview and stuff like that. And I was just waiting for them to bring that up and try to use that as a justification for whatever point that they're making. And then they were like, this particular one, they were saying about like Dutch Mantel. Well, it's a completely different industry. And it's like, yeah, it's when Dutch Mantel was in the business, everybody, people were making money. It was a viable business, and it was thriving on multiple levels. Where nowadays you legitimately need to use all the boys as free labor, because you can't afford anything else, and half the time you can barely afford to pay the guys. So it's like, what do? You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. So it's just one of those things. But I would say, I don't know, it just depends. I mean, if he negotiated with any promotions that he's strictly there to wrestle, then I would say that in the future, they should have it set up to where he has to be there at a certain time. Just make sure you're on time. And after that, that's everything else is going to be taken care of. Like if the show starts, bell time is 8, you need to be there at 7 o'clock. Ring crew and everybody else is going to be here at 6, setting up the building. And if you're a guy like Avery and you're really trying to win hearts and minds, I would say maybe show up, if you wanted to, show up early and just say, hey man, I'm here to help out, just trying to do my part, don't want anyone to think that I'm just getting every opportunity on the planet because I'm AJ Styles' son, which I am, and that is the case, and I am, and all that sort of thing. All of these things are true, but at the same time, I do want everybody to see that I'm not just, I'm not a spoiled brat kid, just some punk kid who's using who's leveraging his dad's celebrity to advance his career. But then Perry Saturn made a very good point that he's going to eventually wind up in NXT. He's going to wind up in WWE, and he's going to be in NXT, and they are going to make him set up the ring. So he's going to learn how to do it one way or the other, because he is trust me, he is going to pay his dues. There is no way, manner, shape, or form. AJ Styles is a great wrestler, phenomenal, no pun intended, but he is not such a big name in the industry that they're just going to let his kid skate by and not do a bunch of the stuff that some of the veterans have had to do over the years. So that would be my opinion on all that. So yeah, that was kind of a controversy. It's just kind of it's an interesting topic because it's something that it kind of speaks to like pro wrestling culture and the philosophies, the varying philosophies between old school veterans and some like the people that maybe never got out of the indies. And speaking of the Eric Cannon guy, because he got into it with AJ, like I was saying, he got into it with AJ about all. Eric has been a guy who's been on the indies forever. I mean, he's just been in. He's like I said, he's one of the guys who's like myself, who's just kind of stuck in the indies. You know, never really advanced. I think he maybe got on. There was a pro wrestling. I think it was this Wrestling Society X or Society Wrestling X or something like that. Pro Wrestling Society X or something like that. It was on MTV. I think he was on that, and that was as far as he went as far as getting any sort of national exposure at any level. But beyond that, he's a guy that if 99% of the human populace saw him, they would not know that he's a pro wrestler. You have to be in the very small minority of highly dedicated, very online pro wrestling fan to know who Eric Cannon is, to pick him out of a lineup. So, you know, no disrespect to him, but I unfortunately, he's going to lose the war of words outside of the internet wrestling community because most people know who AJ Styles is, and unfortunately, his celebrity is going to trump your internet status as far as whose ideas are going to be taken more seriously. But anyhow, I'm just babbling at this point. But I figured it was an interesting topic to cover, and hopefully, all of you found it interesting. And yes, that's it. That's my opinion on the whole dust-up involving Avery Styles and AJ and his Twitter beef with people, and then everybody's varying opinions on it. So anyhow, hopefully you enjoyed it. I'm Dan. This has been Moonshine Talking. As always, stay sick, stay heavy, stay brutal. Always tuck your chin upon impact. Keep head banging, iron slang, and everyone have a good one. Take it easy, and I will catch you on the next video. All right, later.